Well, howdy there, stranger. I'm Jordy.
And I'm Brad.
And welcome back to Beers with Queers, the true crime podcast where I research a case, and Brad here, and potentially you guys.
Don't know a damn thing about it. Except this week, I do. That's right, it's a Brad episode. And this week, I'm leaning heavy into the queer history to bring you a story of one of the most flamboyant gays in British history, who not only made his mark on fashion and London society, but became a legend in World War II, telling friends later, "I've shot so many Nazis, Daddy will have to buy me a sable coat."
Well, I mean, that is quite the opening. I don't really have much to add to that. So, yeah, I think queer history is the perfect way to kick off almost Halloween. We have one more week left of September. Hard to believe, but it's here and it's happening. So it means it's time to start making all the spooky, all the Halloween plans. I actually wrote out a calendar earlier today, and it's already starting to fill up very fast. I think every weekend in October is already booked in some capacity. Actually, I just remembered something else that we have to do that I have to add to the calendar. So, yeah, it just, the fun never stops. And that's not me complaining because it's all fun stuff, so I don't want anyone to think I'm complaining about that because it's like, oh, we have to go here to this convention, or oh, we have this party to go to, or carve pumpkins with friends. I'm very appreciative of all the stimulation because I hate being still.
Speaking of stimulation, I wish you all could have seen what we were doing right before we started taping this episode. If you are watching the YouTube version of this, you might see that I've got glitter all over me, over my head, in my beard, on my chest. And it was because for the short film that we're shooting for the Knoxville Horror Film Festival, one scene required me to throw up glitter.
And we tried to do it with like a funnel, and then, the tried and true trick of just putting it on the other side of your mouth and like projectile vomiting it. However, that didn't work with just two people, and Brad's beard is way too bushy for me to tape it to his face. And so we did it the old, even more old tried and true way, where he just took
I
a
just
big old
did
swig
it. Yeah, just took a big old swig of glitter and made it happen.
and threw it up. And that's what you call showbiz, baby. The show must go on regardless of the obstacles in front of you. Last weekend, one of the only scenes we had to film outside was in the middle, beautiful all weekend, all week. And then a monsoon hit right when everyone was available to film. And so we dragged everyone out in the middle of a monsoon. Shout out to everyone that was there. Thank you very much. And yeah, we made them film underneath a little gazebo by the river. And it was a really good time. It turned out really good. And so that's just one of the many things about filmmaking I love is you got to be ready to switch on the fly and just roll with the punches.
Especially when you only have 2 weeks to do everything. That's write, film, and edit. So the timeline is very quick on this.
It's very quick, and yeah, it really causes you to flex your brain muscles trying to figure out how to get everything you want to include in it because you got 3 minutes and how to do all that because, it doesn't sound like a lot like, oh, 3 minutes and you get 2 weeks to do it. However, just coordinating everything for everyone, getting everything set up, and then on top of actually shooting it and editing it.
And honestly, telling a story in 3 minutes is a lot harder than telling a story in 10.
Very much so. And it's kind of like podcasting where a lot of people think, how hard can it be? You just turn on a microphone and speak into it, and there you go. And it's like, actually, there's a lot. You got to balance out the sound levels. You got to edit out all the coughs and hacks and gags, especially from us because we are hackers. And so they're labor of love. Filmmaking and podcasting go hand in hand in that regard is you got to love it to do it.
And I'm going to be covered in glitter for probably about 2 days. I've washed my hair 4 times, washed my beard 4 times, and
And
it's still got glitter in it.
and it's funny if you watch the video, just look over at him and the whole right side of his face is still just covered in glitter. It doesn't even look like he tried.
I have washed 4 times. Glitter is the STD of the crafting world.
It is, and it's all in the sink, it's all on the toilet, it's all on the floor,
It's in the shower.
it's in the carpet, so God knows where else it is. And so, yeah, gonna be finding that everywhere we look for the foreseeable future.
But hopefully when you guys see the finished product of the video, if you watch it, you'll say, good job.
I was about to say, the final product did look really good, and I don't think we could have accomplished that with a funnel.
No, we couldn't have.
So it looked really good. So I'm very excited to see it on the big screen. And yeah, that's one of the fun things. Every year there's always quirky things like we're vomiting up glitter in a toilet. What are you guys doing on your random night of the week after work? So yes, that's going to be fun. That's coming up. And I think with that, I don't think I have anything else to add, but of course I forget everything. And so I'm ready to hear about flamboyant gay in British history. Love flamboyance, gays, and Britain histories. And the death of Nazis. You said shot many Nazis, so I'm also a very big World War II buff. If you couldn't tell, I think I've jabbered on about it before in the past. And so, yeah, let's see what Brad has in store for us.
Well, first I'm going to start out by saying this was brought to my attention by a listener, so I really appreciate you pointing out Neil Munro Bunny Rogers. Have you ever heard of Bunny Rogers?
I don't think I have actually heard of Bunny Rogers, but it's a sick name, so I'm interested to see what he has in store.
Just you wait, because I read a little bit into Bunny Rogers and was like, okay, I have to do an episode on this person. So let's just go ahead and kick it off. Neil Munro Roger was born on the 9th of June, 1911 in London, into a family that carried both privilege and expectations. His father, Sir Alexander Roger, built a telecommunications business and moved in high circles. His mother, Helen Clark, brought Scottish roots and social grace. Bunny was the middle of 3 sons. Their life was comfortable, a townhouse in London, a leased country estate in Hampshire from the Duke of Wellington, weekends in the countryside, and a staff to care for the house, formal dinners, and social calls. But from early on, Bunny didn't quite fit the mold. As a child, he delighted in spectacle. Around the age of 6, his parents dressed him in a fairy costume for some kind of occasion, light fabrics and wings, and he wore it with pride. Even as a child, he saw how image could shift everything around you. Many see this as the first time when he began figuring out how to be seen, how to present an image, and how to toy with expectations.
There for a second, I thought you said he wore it to pride, and I was about to go in the 1920s.
No, he wore it with pride. In fact, from what they say, once they put it on him and he got all this attention, he was like, I don't want to take it off, ever.
I mean, that's usually how it goes. But also, I was about to be like, wow, that's very progressive of his family. But yeah, so anyway.
He was sent to Loretto boarding school in Scotland. The school was old, storied, set in rigid traditions. Lines of boys in blazers and ties, house morning inspections, chapel, athletics, hierarchy. Everything about it said conform, don't stray, and follow the code. But Bunny had already been rehearsing difference. He had a sensitivity to how clothes sit on flesh, how a turn of a head can shift attention, and how modest alteration and movement can register. To him, uniforms were a blank canvas, and a blank canvas always invites a mark. Over time, that difference built a reputation. He became the boy who looked more than was expected, who dressed with intention even when regulations deemed plainness. He turned uniformity not into erasure, but into a stage for subtle revolt. The school demanded he disappear into the rank and file, but he refused. He turned conformity sideways, learning how to make himself stand out even in the strictest of conditions. When the time came for university, he went to Oxford College to study history. He arrived full of ambition, wanting books, conversation, prestige, access. But he just didn't fit in there. He lasted about a year, and then the university expelled him. The charge was homosexual activities, a vague phrase loaded with moral condemnation. He was accused of corrupting others and summoned before a tribunal of dons and told to leave the school. That moment carried weight. He didn't just lose a place of study, he lost access to networks, status, social standing, and Oxford is more than a school. It's a passage to the elite. And he was shut out of it, not for failing courses, but for a moral verdict imposed by powerful people.
It's just like we covered the secret court of Harvard in 1920, which was Harvard's gay witch hunt. If you've not heard that, I think it's been a hot minute. But I think it's actually like episode 100. But yeah, same situation where all these very promising students got expelled and in trouble. Some who didn't even go to school there for homosexual activity. It just shows you most elite schools have dark histories when it comes to how they treat queer people.
And the thing is, when you're going to like Harvard or Oxford, it's not just the school. This is an opportunity that most people don't get. It's like if you go to Harvard, it's going to open so many doors for you that a normal person never gets. So when they kick you out of a school like this, they're really shutting you out of all of those opportunities, not just learning. They're shutting you out from society, from being set up to succeed in pretty much anything you do. But Bunny didn't fade away. He turned toward art and he enrolled in drawing classes at Ruskin School, shifting from academic ambition to visual life, to fabric, texture, and form. He leaned into what he could command: image, appearance, gesture, and fashion. After Oxford, he made bold choices. He began dyeing his hair, wearing rouge, styling himself so that he would not vanish. On campus, people viewed him as delicate, charming, someone who passed through social groups with a certain lightness. The break with Oxford was also a break with his father's world. Bunny's style and ambitions clashed with his father's more conventional business-oriented values. Their relationship was uneasy, marked by differences in vision, but that gap forced Bunny to draft his own life from that point. And he settled into London, where the air was alive with creative ferment and social contradictions. He began gathering friends in art, theater, literary circles, people more comfortable with aesthetic daring than moral policing. He was eager to find his place in the world, not to just hide, but to be visible. In 1937, he opened his own couture house, calling it Neil Roger. He took a space on Great Newport Street, set it up with dramatic flair. It had a Regency Gothic look, all arching lines, velvet, a touch of shadow. He sent out invitations in Tadler and similar society papers, but always with a little twist. He'd append, "Mary asked me to send this to you," as if to obscure his boldness behind a polite fiction. His tactics were always theatrical, playful, and a little bit subversive. He acquired clients among London's elite. Vivian Leigh was one.
Which, for those of you who don't know who Vivian Leigh is, this is where my part of the episode comes in. Vivian Leigh is, the little known character, Miss Scarlett O'Hara from Gone with the Wind, or you may also know her from A Streetcar Named Desire, both of which won her Oscars. And so, yeah, very good actress.
And a very powerful client to have.
I was about to say, I don't think people today will fully understand how iconic and how powerful someone who played Vivian Leigh was. It was the role
Who played Vivian Leigh?
Who played Scarlett O'Hara. Vivian Leigh played Vivian Leigh very well, but who played Scarlett O'Hara? Scarlett O'Hara was the ultimate, I would argue, more iconic than Dorothy at that time. Like, it was the role to end all film roles. So to have the person who played that role and did it so well is, I'm sure it's a very nice asset to have in your back pocket.
The social doors that had once slammed in his face, he now nudged open with couture and charm. He dressed people, made appearances, became part of a glittering circuit. His house could serve as a stage. In the act of dressmaking and fashion, he claimed legitimacy, allowing him the freedom to be extravagant as he wanted. But social life is never safe. Gossip, rumors, envy, these are the weapons used when someone flouts difference. Bunny had to navigate that without becoming embattled or bitter. He learned discretion, audacity, and the art of knowing when to provoke and when to shade back. His style and persona was a kind of armor for him. When war broke, Bunny Roger answered its call. In 1941, he was commissioned into the Rifle Brigade, and he saw active service in North Africa and Italy. His enlistment was more than just a patriotic gesture. It was a statement. He would enter a realm of danger and duty in his own name. He didn't try to change himself to fit in with the rest of the soldiers. He was going to prove that a man like him was just as brave and competent as any macho man. He became known among his peers for combining audacity with dignity. There are tales that he strode into battle brandishing a rolled copy of Vogue, declaring, "When in doubt, powder heavily." Whether that was a quote or embellished later, it became part of his legend, capturing how he merged the theatrical with the deadly serious situation he was in. In letters and memories, he was described as steady in fire and caring of comrades. He is said to have pulled wounded soldiers from bombed buildings, to have faced shelling with composure, and to have pressed forward where retreat was easier. He fought along the other soldiers amid mud, bullets, and chaos, and proved that a gay man could fight for and deserve the respect of his country.
Yeah, and that's actually, what a lot of servicemen especially have said, especially in recent years, where it's like, like, oh, how do you feel serving with someone who's gay or like that? And most of the time they're like, when you're in it, it doesn't really matter if you're white, black, gay, bisexual, you're all just trying to make it out alive
Just
and
trying to survive.
look out for each other. And when you're literally shielding each other from bullets, it kind of makes you see things a little differently. Like, yeah, I don't really care that he's gay or likes men. That man would take a bullet for me. So not many people can say that.
After the war, he quipped to friends, "I've shot so many Nazis, Daddy will have to buy me a sable coat."
And I 100% read that in the voice of Leslie Jordan. And
Now that you said that, I can't not hear that in the voice of Leslie Jordan.
because and of course, if you don't know who Leslie Jordan is, look him up. You've definitely, at least, you've heard his voice. And he always said daddy. And you'll hear him, he'll be like, I always used to say, "Daddy, watch me twirl." And he says it in a very particular way. And so I can 100% hear Leslie Jordan saying this. And so that's how I hear it in my head. And hopefully that's how you now hear it in yours.
The boast is grand, even outrageous, but it carried symbolic weight. Bunny claimed the role of a warrior, recasting notions of queerness as valor rather than weakness. The same hands that might choose rouge or die also held a rifle and faced mortal danger. His war service gave him legitimacy in a world that often dismissed him as decorative. In battle, he would not be judged for his clothes or his camp manners, but by his courage, by his survival, by duty. And that shift of proving worth in the theater of global conflict allowed him post-war to re-enter society with another kind of authority. After the war, Bunny carried forward a renewed sense of identity, a badge of endurance, and a bridge between the private flamboyance and the public valor he would now inhabit. From his uniformed years, he returned to fashion, to society, and to persona. But he was never the same. The battleground had remade him, hardened his edges, widened his confidence, and in the years ahead, he would leverage that service as part of a claim of being both artist and a man of substance, both a dandy and a soldier. After returning from service, he was invited to run the couture department at Fortman and Mason, a prestigious appointment that gave him institutional shelter and influence. He also invested in the House of Amies, a well-established name taking financial and creative stake. In those years, he solidified his aesthetic: narrow trousers, sharp shoulders, waists cinched, neo-Edwardian influences mingled with dandyism. He wasn't just a client of fashion, he was a force within it. Throughout this, he faced challenges. The marketplace for couture was unstable. Post-war austerity made luxury a difficult sell sometimes, and social mores still resisted open queerness. He had to balance visibility and survival, flamboyance and discretion. Some doors closed, others he pried open himself. By the 1960s, Bunny had become something of a living legend in London high style. His name flouted through fashion magazines, society columns, gossip pages, social registers. He had arrived, and in his own terms. But even then, limits loomed. The law still turned queer lives into criminal lives. Social prejudice still whispered and sometimes shouted that flamboyance was shameful. And the winds of fashion and taste could shift overnight. His insistence on being visible, on being unapologetically queer, was itself a daring act in a culture still smoldering with taboo. In fighting these challenges, Bunny practiced a kind of artistry in life. He claimed dignity and spectacle all at once. The fight wasn't in courtrooms or legislation, it was in cut, in color, and in silhouette, in who showed up to whose party, and how one walked into a room. It was not being ashamed or afraid to show your authentic self, and it was a struggle of persona as much as politics. But that unwavering fight paid off. Over the 1960s, Bunny's persona solidified into an icon status. His presence became a statement. When he entered a room, it was noticed not merely for style, but for force. In a decade when mod fashions and youth revolts shaped taste, Bunny held fast to his language of elegance, even as others chased novelty. He bridged worlds, the old guard of society, the avant-garde of fashion, the quieter networks of queer life. Some younger designers looked to him, some social hosts envied him, and some patrons sought him out to wear his clothes or to just be seen beside him. His reputation as a social host reached new heights. The parties he threw were not merely seasonal celebrations, they were performances of identity. Coded galas where aesthetics and allegiance met. He staged themed balls, diamond, amethyst, flame, for milestone birthdays, events that later became legendary. These were not private events either. They rippled into columns, gossip pages, whispers in drawing rooms. Through these, Bunny extended his reach. One could enter his world or at least get a glimpse of it. So everybody likes to see the columns and everything because it's like you kind of get to live it, even if you're not there.
And I mean, that's true. I mean, that's true today. That's why we watch like Keeping Up with the Kardashians or your favorite influencer on TikTok. It's because it's giving you a glimpse into this magical world where they just get to travel all day, all the time to all these beautiful places, or look at all this wealthy stuff they have. And I'm guilty of it too. So it's just a glimpse into like, wow, that's such a fascinating way of life. Like I love watching it. You know, I wish that was me. And so that has been around for centuries. It just takes on different forms from columns to TikTok. We've come very far.
And even though he was popular, the tension of being openly queer never fully disappeared. He could be glorified in the press, yet snubbed in private circles. He could have the applause of fashion insiders, yet feel the sting of social exclusion. He could be known for his parties and his silhouette, but always wrestle with whether fame was applause or surveillance. By the end of the 1960s, Bunny's identity hardened into legend. Dandy and queercraft, socialite and provocateur, designer and myth. He had passed from outsider to at least quasi-insider, but never surrendered his authentic self. He turned resistance into elegance, risk into invitation, and personal style into culture. As the 1970s wore on, Bunny began to shift his balance between public performance and quieter authority. The couture world was changing. ready-to-wear fashion in shops, mass productions, and shifting ideals of modernism. The workshop model of making one-of-a-kind custom suits and corsets by hand was under pressure, but Bunny held fast to his aesthetic convictions. He didn't chase trends so much as he extended his own language of elegance. In 1973, his investments in the House of Amies were sold to Debenhams, giving him financial relief and the freedom to step back from day-to-day pressures. He had, in effect, secured a legacy stake in fashion institutions so that he could claim both continuity and autonomy. Bunny's time running the couture department at Fortnum and Mason earlier in his career lent him institutional standing. After he was more secure from the daily grind, he focused more on his social life, on collecting, on building environments around himself. He leaned into the performance of persona, not necessarily on runways, but in private and semi-private spaces, dinner rooms, salons, and now his famous theme balls. His 70th birthday amethyst ball remains iconic. Guests in shimmering lavender and silver, elaborate costumes, theatrical entrances, and a decade later for his 80th flame ball, he reputedly entered through smoke and flame in a sequenced outfit to the applause of hundreds. These moments functioned as both spectacle and testament to his amazing life. At 80, he was still refusing to fade away.
I will say they don't throw balls or birthdays like they used to. You know, everything used to have a theme. It used to be all out, like the end all be all. And actually, you know what? Maybe they still do have those parties and I'm just not invited to them. But if you are having a party like that, I very much would like to attend because that sounds amazing. And also the fact that he made it to 80. You know, it's one thing to make it to 80 just in general. You know, that's a ripe age. But to make it to 80 as someone who was visibly queer throughout the 20s, 30s, 40s, especially the 50s, is even more rare and such a sight to behold.
And survived World War II.
And on top of that, survived World War II. So there was so many things going up against him, and the fact that he's still here, not only alive but thriving, is such a story of hope and a light in often darkness. Because, you know, a lot of times queer people are kind of taught by everyone, society, media, and a lot of times it's like, well, you're not going to have a long life, or you're going to die young from like AIDS or HIV, or someone's going to kill you, or you're going to take your own life because, you know, depending on where you live and how they treat queer people. And so a lot of queer people don't think they can live to be 80, you know, and so seeing someone like this during this time period through World War II is such a good story to share and let you know that if he can do it, you definitely can do it.
In his houses and estates, he curated interiors for himself. He turned toward Gothic revival, decorative flourish, and the aesthetic of history remade. He retreated increasingly to his Scottish estate, Dundonald, where he could inhabit his own space of his own design, less harried by the glare of city and society. In that retreat, he continued to entertain, collect, shape persona, but it was all within his own terrain. Still, as time and health pressed in, the flamboyant demands of public life grew harder. The tight tailoring to upkeep, the eyes on every entrance and exit, it exacted a toll. So he began to scale back from some of his social appearances, but he remained present, refusing invisibility, even in partial withdrawal. As the late 1980s and early 1990s rolled in, Bunny continued to host, to attend society nights, to appear in style pages. But he also felt the shift. Younger generations, new queer movements, changing aesthetics. He was no longer the only flamboyant man on the scene. He was a forebearer, a legend whose references young people might study, revise, and critique. In April 1997, Bunny Roger died in London. He was 85. Accounts say he partied until a week before entering the hospital. He remained elegant, with careful posture, and with the same slim waistline he had claimed for decades. In death, as in life, he retained the aura of a man of style, of ritual, and of spectacle. Obituaries described him as a courtier, a wit, a dandy, a landowner, a social ornament, and a lifelong bachelor. Someone who defied convention, a legend of his time. But what of the man behind the legend? In queer memory, Bunny Roger was a gay man living under criminal law for most of his life, navigating society's taboos while insisting on visibility. He was one of those figures whose life is less activist than a living example of activism. He may not have marched in protest or lobbied legislators, but by living boldly, he acted politically. He reframed what it meant to live queer in high society. He taught that flamboyance could coexist with dignity, that persona and truth might not be opposites. He was an example to many gay people of the possibility of a queer life lived on one's own terms rather than being quietly hidden away. Younger queer generations might read him through new lenses, seeing his glamour as camp or his flamboyance as provocation. But his life continues as a reference point. A man who wore suits like armor, who carried himself like he was always center stage, who crossed battlefields and ballrooms, who merged a soldier's grit with a peacock's color. In the long arc of queer history, Bunny Roger remains a shining example of a gay man who lived his life his own way, a figure who refused invisibility, a man who could not only pick up a gun and defend his country against fascism, but dedicated the rest of his life to fight a world built to erase difference and his identity with the weapons that he knew best, with tailoring, with parties, with persona, and with a life lived not just authentically, but vividly. And that is the story of Bunny Rogers.
And what a story that was. And like I said, that is a story that is very inspiring. On top of living openly queer through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, some of the worst periods to be gay, and World War II, he also lived through the HIV/AIDS crisis and the epidemic. And it is fascinating to see someone live through so much progress through queer history. I mean, from 1911 to 1997, I was born in 1997. So to go that whole time span, see how much things have changed from people getting witch hunted out of Oxford and Harvard.
I mean, he saw Stonewall.
He saw Stonewall. He saw the formation of queer communities because, as we know them today, queer hubs like Soho or San Francisco or New York City here in America formed during the 20s and the 30s after World War I. So he lived through that. Like, he lived through the literal formation of queer communities. To see that progress to the McCarthy era in the 1950s, which, even if that happened in America, that also affected Britain and everywhere else, because after World War II, you saw this more wanting to go back to, like,
Traditional values.
family values. And so to live through that, all of this while being openly queer and unapologetic about it. Like, it's not the fact that he's screaming it from the rooftops or anything, because that can be very dangerous, but the fact that he's like, I'm not trying to suppress myself to fit in. And that is such a radical form of protest in and of itself, especially for the time period. And so, yeah, this is just a very inspirational, very good story for young people, especially today, to hear. Because like I said, sadly, a lot of the times you don't get stories like this. It's very few and far between, especially from this time period, because that's just sadly how the world it was not most of the time happy if you were anything other than white and heterosexual. And so very much appreciate stories like this being brought to our attention, because it reminds you that there's always going to be light in the darkness and there's always hope. So be like Bunny Rogers, don't give up hope.
And if you really want to piss off the haters, thrive. That's
Use-
all you got to do. You
And
just got to thrive. And that pisses them off more than anything.
A wise poet once said, the best revenge you can have is to just be better. And that was Alaska from RuPaul's Drag Race Season 5 and All Stars 2. And those are really good words to live by. Yeah, like, I mean, I don't need to yell at you or try to degrade you or make fun of you. The best revenge I can get is just to be better than you at whatever I try.
Even if it's just being a nice person.
Yeah, even if it's just being nice, it's like, that's you with the hate in your heart. I'm at peace. I know I'm a good person. I'm going to be kind. And at the end of the day, I go to bed just fine. And so, yeah, be like Bunny Rogers and Alaska and live your life to its fullest and don't let anyone try to dim that light in you. But yeah, I think that was a very good story. That was a very good change of pace. It's very nice to hear queer history that's not somewhat tragic. So this is a very good palate cleanser. Definitely probably going to include more. There's actually were a few that I've been thinking about including, like just stories of queer people from the past that I was always more on the fence about because I was like, it's queer history, but nothing criminal, I guess, happens. But like we always say on this podcast, just being queer is a crime to this day in like over 100 countries. So yeah, I think we'll be having a little bit more of these every now and then because that was very, very good episode, very informative. And we ended the episode in a good mood, which is rare to say for a true crime podcast. So with that, thank you so much, Brad, for bringing the story of Bunny Rogers to our attention and sharing it with all our listeners. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a 5-star rating or review on iTunes or Spotify. Helps us out a lot. It helps other people discover the podcast. And of course, we just love hearing from you guys. If you want to see photos from today's case, you can follow us on Instagram at Beers with Queers Pod, that's POD, or on Facebook at Beers with Queers, a true crime podcast. And until Monday, stay dangerous out there, my friends.
See you soon.